I don't know where my turn is. Hold on here a minute. Oh crap. This is steep, I'll tell you that. I'll see you guys in the morning. Hey guys, it is Mission Discover, and welcome back to another episode of The Learning Curve. And in today's episode, you guys are going to see me embark on my first ever solo backpacking trip. If you guys are unfamiliar with the channel, I have spent several nights in a tent, but it's all been close to a civilization. I've done plenty of hiking and am well versed in survival techniques and bushcraft techniques, but I've never put them all together and went on a backpacking trip where I had all my gear on my back and we stayed out kind of in the middle of the woods by ourselves. So today, that's what we're gonna do. So I'm here at one of the only state forests in my general area. In Pennsylvania, you are allowed to do what's called dispersed camping, aka camping that you don't have to pay for on state forest lands. This is the Penn State Forest, specifically Gibraltar Hill. And today we're gonna go up in there for my first ever backpacking trip. You guys are gonna come along for the ride and we're gonna see what I learn. So let's get after it. Alrighty, so I just drank this whole bottle to make sure I'm nice and hydrated before I get on the trail, since I can only carry so much water. Gonna lock up the truck here. I got my backpack here all loaded up with everything we're gonna need. I'll talk about the gear once we get out on trail and start doing some stuff. Putting my keys in one of the hip belt pockets. And now I get the backpack on. All right, I think we're ready to go. Heading up into the woods. A couple key things I want to mention right as we start our hike here is that, first of all, I don't really suggest that the average Joe out there goes out and does a solo backpacking trip as their first ever backpacking trip. But as I mentioned, I have done a lot of this style of stuff before individually. It's just putting it together that's what I'm doing today. I do also want to mention that I have tested all of this gear that I'm bringing with me before, and I know how all of it works. I also have extensively researched this area and done a lot of research on the maps. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And finally, you just have to know what your expectations really are. I'm out here to experiment and have a good time. I tried to reach a balance of having nice gear, lightweight yet durable, not super expensive, and I did bring some things just to have fun and to have a little bit extra comfort. I'm not super concerned about weight, but it is pretty reasonable. I tested my base weight before I left my house. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's your weight of all your gear without food or water, and my base weight was around 23 pounds, which I think for a fit guy like me is pretty reasonable to do, even with all this elevation. This is a really cool scenic area. It's also nice because it's a little bit flatter here. I just walked up that really steep hill. This is a nice break under the power lines here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Look at that. Super cool. This little marker here says there's a campsite over there. I'm probably gonna stay at one of the already developed campsites just because that's a little bit easier, but there's not any regulations saying you specifically have to. But we're gonna go check this out and see what it looks like. Campsite this way, it seems. Here you go. This might be where we're staying tonight. Nice little picnic table. Where would I set up my tent? Maybe over here? I don't know, we gotta look around. Maybe right here. This doesn't seem like a half bad spot either. Yeah, we'll have to think about that. But yeah, I think this is where I'm going to set up. It's 4:27. I think I might do that now and then walk around with a little bit less weight in my pack. Alrighty, I'm about to get some of my tent stuff set up, so I think now is the perfect time to start talking about some of our gear. First of all, I obviously brought a chair. There's a lot of chairs out there like this. This is a GCI outdoors chair. It's kind of just like a folding portable stool. It only weighs about 1 pound. And as much as we have that nice picnic bench over there, I do want to go out and see the stars this evening in that more open area that we were hiking through earlier. So I brought this along just to be a little bit more comfortable while doing so. And I think it's going to end up being something that I'm happy I brought along. Secondly, since we're gonna open it up right now, let's talk about the bag. This is a Marding top bag. I believe it's a 55-liter version. And I bought this bag specifically for doing things like this, camping type trips. It's not a super cheap bag, and it's by no means an expensive bag. You can get it for around $80-ish, but it's made with some pretty high quality components, and people have seemed pretty happy with it in the reviews that I've seen. And since this isn't something I'm going to be using all the time, I was happy with getting kind of a middle of the road quality bag. In my testing so far, it's been very comfortable, and I think it'll do the job for trips like this. Now into my sleep setup, which I'm about to set up here in a minute. This is all stuff you guys have seen on the channel before. I have numerous shorts testing different pieces of my outdoor sleep system, and this is all stuff that has been on the channel in those videos. So I'm just gonna run through it super quick. First of all, I do set up a tarp tent. It's not an actual tent, it's a tarp that you can configure with your tarp poles to be like a tent. My tarp is a 10 by 10 foot climate roamer. I have these sand-like tarp poles, which I have a aftermarket red little rubber topper. It's right over there. I put that on there so it doesn't puncture the tarp. I also have this Wind-Tor footprint that I put underneath my sleeping pad to protect against punctures and just keep me a little bit more secluded from the elements. I also have my Wise Owl tent stakes in here, just simple aluminum tent stakes. Then I have my Trekology gear. This is my UL80 sleeping mat. Fairly cheap sleeping mat that gets the job done and is quite comfortable. And I have a Trekology inflatable pillow. And finally, we have my one Tigris quilt. This is rated down to 40 degrees, plus I sleep a little bit warm, so it should be more than enough for tonight. It's not supposed to get down to even less than 50, I believe. I do have some other gear in here that I want to talk about, especially since a lot of the learning curve of this video is going to be me figuring out what's good gear to bring, what stuff I should have brought and didn't, what stuff I should have left at home. So I definitely want to make sure you guys are aware of what I brought with me. But first, we're going to set up the tent. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is take these wood planks and rocks that someone used to make a little design and put them over there. If this was you, I'm sorry that I'm moving it, but my tent has a pretty big footprint, so I gotta make sure I got space here. I'm also kind of just using my foot to clear the area of debris. As much as I have a tent footprint and a patch kit, I want to be as careful as possible with my inflatable pad here. Next, I laid out my tarp on the ground and used my poles and tent stakes to set up my typical tarp tent setup. I then inflated my sleeping pad and took out my quilt, leaving me with this nice sleeping setup. Alrighty, now that I've got the tent set up behind me, I'm gonna run over the rest of the gear that I brought with me, have my dinner, and then we're gonna hike around for a bit. I'm gonna see if I can make it to the summit and go get water before it gets dark. Obviously, water's the priority. We'll have to see how much time we have. I am going to have to hike quite a ways to go get water, but we'll talk more about that once we get to it. But while we're on the subject, let's talk about my water filtration gear that I brought with me. Even more than our shelter system, these are the most important pieces of gear that I brought with me. What I have is a basic 3-part system, and I've talked about this in a previous short on the channel. I have a Life Straw Peak series as my water filter, and this allows me to drink directly from a water source or attach it to a standard mouth like on either of these pieces of equipment here and filter through that. It's worked really well for me so far. The flow rate's pretty good. All the things you want to see out of a fairly cheap water filter, it's got. So this is going to be my main method of filtration. I do have some water purification tablets in my bag as well, just in case. The second piece is this platypus water bag. I'm going to use this to scoop water directly out of the water source, and then I'm going to filter it through this into our third piece of equipment, which is just a basic plastic water bottle. These are 16-ounce water bottles, and I have 3 of them. They are currently filled with ice water, and I'm gonna drink them as I'm hiking around here this evening. And they should be about empty by the time I get down to the water source, so I can fill them back up, hike back, and have enough water available for the evening and tomorrow morning. The next most important thing we have is food. I have a whole bunch of these little organization bags. They're super, super light, but they do the job. I use these for packing when we're traveling and stuff like this. They're just generally super useful, and you can find them for really cheap online. And kind of going back to our theme of, you know, not trying to have the most lightweight, the most fancy stuff, but stuff that can get it done and stuff that keeps me comfortable and happy while I'm out here. I don't have any fancy backpacking meals or stuff like that. I just brought along regular food. I have a little wrap here. I kept it refrigerated in the car on the way here. It's only been non-refrigerated for about 2 hours now. And then I have a whole bunch of packaged food. This is going to be my dinner and snack for tonight. And there's my breakfast for tomorrow morning. They're all in plastic bags or tin foil, super lightweight, basic stuff. I'm not going super fancy here. And when I'm done with the food, I'm going to take this larger plastic bag, put all the trash in there, and then use a throw line and hang this up from a tree as a bear bag. Super, super basic. Don't have a dedicated bear bag. Don't have a dedicated food system. It's just basic food that you can get from anywhere, and I think it'll do the job. I also brought along my bushcraft and survival just outdoor kit. I have a whole video dedicated to this on the channel. That video is pretty old now. There have been some updates made to this kit, and the video is not quite up to the standards of quality that I do today, but it's still good stuff. I'm not going to go into detail of what we have in here, but this is basically just to cover any sort of random incident that occurs outside of first aid. Just being able to tackle outdoor situations and have a little bit of fun, this can do it. This is also where those water tablets are. Whole bunch of random stuff in here, and the kit only weighs like 1.5 pounds, so I didn't feel like I was, you know, gonna sacrifice anything by bringing it along. I also have a rain jacket. It's not supposed to rain, but this is always a good just in case. It doesn't weigh a ton. It can also protect from wind, and I think it's something that most backpackers bring along, even if it's not supposed to rain, so I thought I should follow suit. I also brought my slingshot kit. I did take out some of the non-essential pieces of the slingshot kit just to drop a little bit of weight, but this is just something to have fun with tomorrow morning. As I said, I wanted to be comfortable and happy above all, so I brought this along. It's only like 1 pound. I also have my outdoor first aid and health kit. I have a whole video dedicated to this as well. It's more extensive than most first aid kits. However, I am first aid certified, so if something goes wrong, I actually do know how to use every single thing in this kit, and I think it gives me a little extra peace of mind while being out here. I also brought a monocular. As we're hiking around, I might want to take a look at some stuff far off, and this is very minimal in weight, so I brought it along. I have a camp knife, just something good to bring along, just to tackle any sort of scenario you might run into. And then a headlamp. This will be very important. Keep in mind, in my pocket, I do have an EDC knife and flashlight, just as an extra redundancy. I think a knife and a flashlight for the type of things that I do are good redundancies to have. And to wrap it up, I brought along 2 cameras, this one and the one I'm currently filming on, as well as some batteries for those cameras and a power bank. And oh yeah, I do have my phone as well. Now that I've showed you all the gear I brought, I'm gonna eat my dinner and then we're gonna start hiking around. I really hope we can make it up to the summit before this night ends. If not, we'll be able to go up there tomorrow morning, but I wanna make sure I get in as much as possible, so hitting the summit tonight would be really, really cool. And then after that, we're gonna have to go get some water before it gets dark. I then enjoyed my meal and listened to some music before packing up my bag once more and heading out for the evening hike. All right, I got everything back in the backpack. I'm gonna head out of camp. We're gonna try and go see if we can get to the summit here and go get water before it gets dark. It's 5:49, the sun sets at about 7, which means we have until about 7:05, 7:10-ish till I really wanna be back here. So we're gonna kinda get a move on, have a pretty brisk pace, but I think we can go see the summit and get water in enough time. By the way, one of the things I did wanna mention is my footwear. I am wearing the Columbia Drainmaker water shoes that I have a full review video on. I'm wearing these because I find them very, very comfortable when wearing socks, and because of the nature of them being kind of hybrid water shoes, they should dry out really, really quickly if I happen to get them wet. All right, there's where we came in, down that way. So we're making good time. We should be able to get up to the summit. It's pretty steep. I don't know if you guys can tell. There's some good elevation gain on this hike, but we're gonna get up there, I think. Right up next to these power lines. This is a cool little area to hike. This kind of area is where I'm gonna come down and look at the stars once it gets dark. We're making really good time. This is the bend up here where we start working our way up the hill towards the summit, which means we're about halfway from our campsite to the summit. Now the problem is it is steep. So this is probably gonna take longer than the first half of the journey, but we're gonna keep pushing. Rounding another bend here. I think we walked that way for a while and then turned back up the hill. I might have to reference the map again. Gets a little bit thick in here. Gotta check for ticks when we get back. I don't know where my turn is. Hold on here a minute. All right, we got to backtrack here. I think our turn's further back. All right, we're getting off course here. Got to pick up the pace a bit. All right, I backtracked the other way. Somehow I got the map a little bit confused. I think we're on the right path now. It's definitely going in more of the correct direction. So regardless of whether this is the actual one I'm supposed to be on, it's getting me closer to the goal. So I'm gonna stay on this and hopefully we make it up to the summit. Definitely is going up, I'll tell you that. Oh wow, this is steep, I'll tell you that. I mean, look at that. I'm not sure the camera does it justice, but it's steep going down that way. Should be pretty easy going back down, but going up is a struggle. So we still got to go all that way. I think this is the turn up to the summit where you can see the towers. I'm not quite sure what the towers are for. They could be cell phone towers. That would be my bet. I can probably look it up and drop it in during editing, but supposedly they're right up here. I'm seeing power lines. That means we're probably almost up to the towers. I see the tower. Oh yeah, man. We've just about made it to the top. Oh yeah. Boom. There's the tower. I mean, it probably gets a little bit higher than this up on that hill, but in my book, we made it to the top. I'm gonna drink some water and head back down the way we came so that I can go refill my water at the creek. It's a 2-mile trek from my campsite to get to the creek, which means it's probably closer to a 2.5-mile trek from here. So we gotta make our stay here brief. Alrighty, as I was sitting there drinking my water and looking at the tower, I guess there's our answer. Radio transmission tower. That's what it is. Alright, now it's time to make our descent and make the trek to go refill our water. Oh yeah, this is definitely going to be a lot quicker than coming up. Oh yeah, this is steep, man. But we're making good time. I almost have to slow myself down on the way down. We're probably 4 times as quick as coming up. Just gotta watch my step. There you go. Cool little view. You can kind of see the elevation we're at. That ridge way over there is slightly taller probably than what I was just on top of. And you can definitely see that like little farm area over there or factory area. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's significantly lower altitude than we are. So even though we're most of the way down this hill, we're still pretty high up. All right, we're pretty much back to the area in which we started the journey up to the summit. And from here, it's a little less than a 2-mile round trip to go get water and go back to the campsite. And I've got 35 minutes until sunset, meaning it might be a little bit dim on our journey back, but I've already walked that twice, so I'm okay doing that with a headlamp. I don't feel like I'm gonna get lost. It's not a super complicated route whatsoever. That is kind of the perfect segue into the first big thing that I'm learning about solo backpacking. That being planning, especially looking at the maps, is really, really important. I looked at probably 4 different maps to make sure I knew this area and all the different features. I knew which areas were the steepest, so I could calculate how much time it was going to take me to go between places, and especially figure out how to go get water. On the first 2 maps that I looked at, it looked a lot like I could just walk down from the trail that my campsite's on to the creek, but that is by no means the truth. There's essentially like a cliff area and undeveloped trails in that area between my campsite and the creek, and you realistically have to go down towards where my truck is that way, meet up with the developed Schuylkill River Trail, and follow that for a little bit to get down to the creek. I definitely wouldn't have known that if it wasn't for looking at several maps, and I also don't think I would have had as good of an idea of whether I could actually make that summit in enough time to go get water if I didn't do so much research. So my suggestion would be to look at as many maps as you possibly can and do as much research as possible on a place you've never hiked before trying to stay the night there and do a little adventure like I'm doing. Alrighty, gonna walk back down this way. We're essentially gonna walk right past the truck. Typically in backpacking trips, you don't go back to your starting point partway through the trip. I'm not picking up anything from the truck. I mean, I guess I could cheat and you guys would never know, but we're gonna walk all the way down to the creek and get some water, but we should be able to see the truck from this vantage point here. Cool little rock pile areas. I'm not sure how I didn't see that on the way up. I was probably so focused on just getting up to see the campsite. All right, well, there's the truck. And right here is the Schuylkill River Trail, which you guys have seen me hike on a live before, and I've fished along it several times. It's fairly well developed, so this should be an easy hike. We're gonna go down here and get the water. There you go, Schuylkill River Trail. This is even paved. This is some glamorous backpacking here. I didn't really anticipate walking on this trail, but you got to do what you got to do to go get water. This definitely is a cool little section of the trail right up along the railroad tracks. Super cool. Some deer back in there. That one's looking at me. Oh, now that one moved. There they go. That's a cool little marshy section down in there. Super cool. And then you got the train tracks and the power lines up on this side. All right, well, I'm off the trail now. I'm gonna go down in here, see if I can get down to the creek and fill up my water. We have made it. Let's get some water. Oh crap. Well, ladies and gentlemen, perfect demonstration here. I made it down to the creek and I'm about to get my water. However, my squeeze bag is not in here. I imagine since it's so light, it just bounced out of these pockets as we were kind of tumbling our way down the hill on our descent from the summit. That's why we bring backups, especially when you're on a solo mission. I'm gonna pull out some of the water purification tablets and do it with that, I guess. That's why we bring backups. All right, so I've transferred all my clean water from each of the 3 bottles into this one bottle. So I have 2 empty ones. I'm gonna put that back in there. I'm gonna come down here and fill up both of the empty ones. Water looks nice and clean. Don't have to do any pre-filtering with a rag or anything. Put the cap on that. Make sure I don't put it back in the bag so I don't mix them up. That can go right there. Fill up the second one and then we'll pop in the water purification tablets. They should take about 30 minutes to do their job. So I'll make sure to drink from the clean one until that's ready. All right, there's 2 full bottles. Find the water purification tablets. Should be in this little box. Boom, there they are. Each of these should do a liter, but I'm gonna pop 1 in each just to make sure we're extra purified. There's 1, I'm gonna do the other one and then we're gonna start heading back. I'm also going to use the life straw to drink straight out of the creek before we leave, so that way I can get as much water in me as possible before heading back. All right, I'm grabbing the headlamp just because the sun has now set. It's just not quite dark yet, so it'll probably be a little bit dim by the time we're getting back to camp. So I want to have the headlamp out and ready. Now it's time to get back to camp for the night, watch the stars, hang out, and go to bed. All right, let's get moving. Gotta get back up here and onto the Schuylkill River Trail again. Alrighty, heading back out. Back on trail, and look at that view. You can see the tower up on the top there. It's right about there. And yeah, we were up there earlier today. You can see the ridge, you can see how high it is, and you can see the sun setting. Super cool view. Alrighty, here's where we get off the Schuylkill River Trail, and it's definitely dim enough to put the headlamp on, so I'm gonna do that and make the little trek back to camp. We've made it up the steep ascent towards the campsite. Somehow it felt steeper in the dark, but we're in the home stretch till we can sit down and relax. Well, one thing I can say immediately is that this headlamp was definitely the right choice. There's a lot lighter and smaller headlamps out there, but the amount of power and battery life this one has is super awesome. And I can light up the trail like this, super, super bright, and not worry about if I'm gonna run out of battery. Campsite marker, and we are coming back up to our campsite. Oh yeah, that's a comforting sight. See the tent all set up, ready to go. My chair looks fantastic. Definitely gonna go sit in it. All right, now we relax. Alrighty, I've been sitting here on my chair for a while, just relaxing and letting my legs get a little bit of a break. But now I'm gonna take the chair down there as well as my food, and we're gonna go see if we can see some stars. Walking down to the spot, you can definitely tell there's a lot of cicadas around. Take a listen. I'm gonna stop so you can hear. It's a lot of noise out here. Honestly, that's pretty cool. You can hear the train. While sitting out in the field, I snapped these really cool pictures, enjoyed my evening snack, and had a couple phone conversations to keep myself occupied before I ended up heading back to the campsite for the night. I was on the way back to camp and I found this thing. Look at that. Wow, kind of weird and creepy, but still cool. Once back at the campsite, I hung up my food bag in a tree to keep it away from animals, then brushed my teeth, and got settled in for the night. Alrighty, I'm about to get myself tucked in. I'll see you guys in the morning. Good morning. It is 6:51 in the morning. The sun rose just a couple minutes ago, and I just got up. Probably gonna sit in the tent for a couple more minutes. It feels a little bit chilly outside, and then we're gonna venture outside and get the morning started. I've now made it out of the tent. I think I'm going to head down to where we were looking at the stars last night and see if we can see the sun coming up over the horizon. That'd be pretty cool. Then we're gonna have breakfast, pack up camp, and we'll see what we do from there. All right, well, the sun is coming up over there. Once it makes it over those trees, I'll be able to get a nice picture. But I'm just gonna sit here, enjoy the morning. It's now 7:02. I'm probably going to try and head out of here around 9:30-ish. Probably not gonna do a lot of hiking this morning. Just gonna chill around the camp. Probably shoot a little bit of slingshot, that sort of thing. Should be a pretty fun and relaxing morning. While out in the field in the morning, I got a couple more nice pictures, enjoyed my breakfast, and took a look around with the binocular before heading back to pack up camp. Alright, I'm back at camp, and first things first, I gotta get my food bag out of the tree, and then I'm gonna pack up the tent, and I should be ready to just kind of relax from there on out. Got that down. Now it's time to take care of this. After meticulously packing up my tarp tent and my sleeping gear, I decided to do a quick slingshot session. However, this was cut short when one of the plugs fell out. Unfortunately, that will have to be replaced. Well, our slingshot session was cut short, so I think it's the perfect time to run over some of my thoughts on all the gear that I brought and get down to brass tacks of talking about what I learned, whether I should have brought some of this stuff, whether I shouldn't have brought some of that stuff, as well as a couple of other things that I may have learned. And then I think we're gonna hike around for a little bit before we leave. First of all, I gotta say every single piece of gear that I brought along with me worked really, really well. All of it was used in some capacity, and I've tested pretty much all of this stuff before, so this is kind of what I expected, but it is good to know that while out on trail, this all does its job. A couple key things to note about which pieces of gear I brought and which choices I made. I know I mentioned it last night, but bringing the larger headlamp was definitely a good idea. The extra output just makes it a little bit more comfortable, and I am willing to expend the weight and size to be able to have that luxury. Also a good thing to note, especially since I'm out here solo, all my redundancies were things I was very happy to have, especially with the water situation, as you guys saw yesterday. Because I lost the filter bag, I wasn't able to filter it directly through here into my water bottles and had to use the aqua tablets. Also, on our food situation, I was very happy with just eating plain old packaged foods and a sandwich. And I think for short trips like this, there's no need to get extra special with backpacking meals and having to boil water and all that. This worked really well. And our little bear bag solution with just a plastic bag and some string was also quite effective. And I think for short trips, this is what I'm gonna stick with. Also, the chair was definitely worth bringing. I definitely enjoyed sitting on this, relaxing, watching the stars out there. It was definitely worth the about a pound of weight that I had to expend to bring this. Some of my comfort items, like my earbuds and my slingshot, were definitely enjoyable this trip, but if I was to do a trip with other people, I definitely wouldn't bring these. And finally, while talking about the gear I actually brought with me, even though it didn't rain, I still stand by the fact that bringing the rain jacket was a good idea. Continuing on, I have two pieces of equipment that I didn't bring with me that I think I probably should have in hindsight. First of all, I had downloaded a map on my phone, but for maximum preparedness, I realistically think I should have printed out the map and then either got it laminated or stuck it in a large plastic bag, because you really don't want to be relying on your phone for everything while you're out here, especially since it could get wet and then get broken. You definitely want to have a more hard copy version of important things like a map. Second of all, this morning I had to take care of some business, if you know what I mean, and I did not bring a trowel. I knew there were a lot of rocks in this area, so I just flipped one over, put the waste underneath of it, and then flipped the rock back over on top of it. But that's not an option you're going to have everywhere, so I think in the future bringing a small trowel is probably a good idea. And finally, to wrap up the things that I learned in this video, I want to stress the importance of planning and doing your research, as well as knowing yourself. Especially if you're going to do a solo trip like I did, you need to know how much you can push yourself during the hikes. You need to know what you're going to feel like while sleeping in the tent alone in a kind of unfamiliar place. You need to know what it's going to be like walking around in the dark in your area. As I mentioned yesterday, you have to know the trail so you can predict how much time things are going to take you, where to go get water, all those sorts of things. And you definitely have to have some sort of plan. I knew going into this that yesterday was going to be my big hiking day. I wanted to hit the summit. I needed to go get water. I needed to set up the tent, and then I was going to relax in the evening. And I also knew that I was mostly just going to be relaxing this morning. I feel like if you didn't have that kind of a plan set out, you wouldn't enjoy your time as much, and you'd be searching for things to do instead of just executing. And especially on a shorter trip like this, I think it's really, really important to maximize your time. I also know my own level of fitness, and I knew I could do that summit and go down to get water in enough time. You need to know how long it's going to take you. You need to know that you're going to be okay doing it. I really, really want to stress that. I've done a lot of experimentation while hiking, sleeping in the tent, doing survival skills, and I know exactly where my limits and boundaries are. And I wouldn't have done this trip by myself if I didn't know exactly where my boundaries were. But that's pretty much all I have to say as far as my learning experiences throughout this trip. With all that being said, it's about 8:40. I want to be out of here by about 9:30. So I'm going to pack up all my stuff, get it in the backpack, and we're going to hike around for a little bit and head home. Before heading out, I did one final loop, going the opposite direction on the trail out front of my campsite, and I'm just going to let the scenery roll as I conclude this video. I really enjoyed making this video and going on this trip, and maybe this video taught you something as well. If either of those are the case, I would really appreciate you hitting the like button and possibly thinking about subscribing if you haven't, because I've got more informational and educational outdoor-centered content coming your way real soon. Alrighty, I've now made it back to the truck, and with that, that's all I'm going to have for you guys in this video. God bless, and I'll see you next time.